What's up, guys? Let's talk about the Aspen 25 cal, 22 cal review. Now, if you checked out my other video, you know we're going to do an accuracy review and overall thoughts, but to get some people up to speed, this is a multi-pump air rifle, multi-shot. So unlike a lot of other air rifles in the I guess the basic or the lower expensive scale, you have Springers, which are a one cock shot. And then you have a multi-pump, but it's one shot. The nice thing about this is it kind of acts like a PCP air rifle, meaning you use the handle, you pump it up 60 to 120 times, and you get 10 to 20 shots, depending on the caliber and the power range. So that's essentially kind of the competition it's going off of. This rifle, or these rifles, these multi-pump, multi-shot rifles, have a weird, I guess, competitive area where there's really not a lot of competition. You're either going against the Springers and the single shot pumps or the PCP air rifles, which takes a lot of gear. Before we get into the accuracy, I want to talk about some of my experiences, some of the downsides. First off, in using this, I had a 22 cal clip, or I should say magazine, that broke on me. Now, my first outing to the 25 cal or 25 yard range, this worked really well. It's a nice, inexpensive magazine, but it blew a spring in and pretty much on the 55 yard range went out. That's issue number one. Issue number two is we have two of these. We have a 22 cal and a 25 cal. What were the differences in pumping? This is kind of strange. The 25 cal, pumping it up to about 3,600 PSI, was roughly like 100 pumps or so. The strange thing is the 22 cal, pumping up from 0 to 3,600 PSI took like 130 pumps. And so what I noticed time and time again is the efficiency in pumping was very inconsistent. Meaning, for one rifle to get it back up to the same pump, you're pumping almost 1.5 times more. Now the 25, for some reason, had more efficient pumping. So the third issue that I ran into was the thing when I check these guns out is, does it hold air? And what I noticed is the 25 cal, I'd pump it up to 3,600 PSI and it would deflate after about 2 or 3 days down to 2,800 PSI. Now the 22 version of this would keep the air pressure at 3,600 PSI. I've had some of these other air rifles in the past, these multi-pump, multi-shot rifles like the Nova Freedom, and they pretty much held their air consistently where you lift them for like a week or 2 weeks or something like that. So just know that, you know, checking your rifle out, if you get one of these, pump it up, don't shoot it for a day or two, just let it sit and see if it holds air. Another issue that I had is the tether. There's a tether probe underneath that you can, if you don't want to pump this up because it has this air cylinder, you can fill up with an air tank and you can kind of shoot it tethered. The issue with this is it worked if you just wanted to fill up the rifle one time and release the tether. Sadly, at the 55 yard range, this was an issue because the tether kept kind of blowing back out. So to fill this rifle, for me, I had to really jam the probe in, fill it up, and then kind of pull the probe back out. Because if I didn't, it would eventually kind of blow out. Gravity would just kind of shoot it out the bottom, and it was a mess. So a little bit of workaround there. If you're thinking about shooting this tethered, there are probably some workarounds, but I couldn't get it necessarily to shoot shot after shot tethered. It's a big pain. Another thing you see is high power. On both air rifles, high power was it was using a lot of air. And on the 25 cal, it was ridiculous, meaning, you know, you get about 5 shots or so and you're really starting to pump. Now, the foot-pounds of energy, 28 to 36 foot-pounds of energy, very doable, which puts it well above the single pump, single shot rifles or the Springers. It literally is in a PCP air rifle category, but just know when you're pushing that much energy, you have a tendency to waste a lot of air and it's really shooting very, very hot. After 10 to 15 shots, you're gonna have to repump. Now, this is the thing. With the 177 caliber that I had years ago, you could probably get 20 to 30 shots on low power. For instance, 12 foot-pounds of energy, 14 foot-pounds of energy. You could get many more shots, but this, having such a small air cylinder, 10 to 15 shots, maybe 20. We'll go over kind of the details here in a little bit at the range, but just to let you know, yeah, it can be a little bit problematic if you're expecting to be shooting a lot. Another one is the accuracy, tune, and fill pressure. So to get this to work accurately, you got to be very cognizant on your fill pressure and the hammer spring and where you're shooting at. So you might be able to get 15, 20, even 20 some plus shots on low, but your point of impact's going to drop, and that's where you kind of get into the actual tune. So you have all this air and you kind of funnel it down to, let's say, 5, 8 shots. Lastly is the scope mounts. It's 12mm dovetail. It's kind of outdated. You're going to need an adapter, just things to look for. It's a little bit of a bummer. They can't put a, I guess, you know, a regular, I guess, Picatinny on here to kind of help people out without an extra adapter. Enough with the chatter, enough with the bad stuff. Let's look at the groups. 25 yards, indoor range. We were all over the place. I tested, I don't know, half dozen, maybe dozen different projectiles. 18.1s were my first go-to. I thought that would knock it out of the park. It didn't do all that great. And then we look at some of the slugs. FX slugs, those generally work in anything. Those weren't the greatest, the FX slugs. Then we had Daystate slugs. Those, you know, weren't anything to write home about. But the 2 or 3 that worked with the 22 cal is the 25 grain FX 22 slugs. Those weren't too bad at 25 yards, but really the good stuff, and this is consistent with the experiences years ago, was the 13.4 grain pellets in 22 cal JSB and the 15 grain. They were, you know, dime size groups and easily very consistent with this. So that's the nice thing. This is 5-shot group, 13 grain, dime size groups at 25 yards. Pretty consistent. And that being said, on low power, it wasn't using a lot of air. And yeah, those really light pellets in this rifle, they're moving pretty fast. So the slope or the drop isn't as significant. And so getting out to the 55-yard range, I did not test the 25 cal. Ran out of time at the 25-yarder because there was a lot of pumping. But we have some good results, and it's kind of similar. So what are the results that you can get at 55 yards with some of this? Well, some of the things that kind of were obvious. The 25 grain FX 22 slugs didn't group that well. They started kind of spiraling going out of the thing. And that's one of the situations you need to look at some of these air rifles. They'll go 25, 35, 40 yards, pretty tight nickel and dime size groups. And then they start to really open it up when you hit that 50-yard mark. In 55 yards and more, if it's not a clean shot, meaning coming out of the barrel, you'll start noticing some imperfections with your accuracy. For some reason, the 22 cal and this Aspen didn't like the 18.1s, which is very rare because most of the air rifles love those. And the 25 cal, I should say the 25 grain 22 cal FX slugs started really breaking down. And of course we tried the slugs and everything else. That stuff was just, let me see, it was just all over the place, guys. If you can see this, I'll put in the things. It just wasn't even a group at that distance, where at the 25-yard marker it was. But the best groups I was able to get is roughly around a nickel size, dime size groups using the 13.5s, 13.4s, and the 15.8 grain pellets. And so there's a problem with this shooting outdoors. Myself, I dislike those 13.4s and 15 grains because a little bit of wind blows them everywhere. They're very hard to shoot. In fact, myself, I'd rather shoot a 10.2 grain, 10.4 grain 177 pellet moving a little faster, because just the diameter and the size of those really light pellets, just any kind of wind. And essentially that's what we're seeing on the video here. Stuff just getting blown around. You can kind of see the marks in the paper tearing sideways, but that's kind of unfortunate about this rifle. Now, in the 22 cal, my belief is that yes, you could probably get the 25 grains flying, rework the barrel, clean the barrel, and pump it up. You're just going to be pumping a lot more. Now, for the good side of things, the 25 cal, we're looking at roughly a dime and a quarter dime or nickel size group with the JSB 25.4s. Those were, they just performed really well. I didn't even try any other pellet because it ran so well. Right out of the box, put those in and shot, and it was just boom, right on. The nice thing about the 55 yard with a little bit of wind with those 25.4 JSB 25 cals is the wind wasn't moving around nearly as much. So I could get a better grouping on that. That was on low power. So shooting on high power for the 25 cal, a ton of air. So what can you expect? Probably at 55 yards, you're looking at 5, maybe 8 shots of the 25 cal on low power. On high power, you're probably looking at 5 shots or less in that sweet zone, in that tunable zone. 22 cal, you're probably looking at 5 to 10 shots. Now, if you're going at 25 yards, you might be able to get 20 shots on the 22 with those 13.4 grainers because they're flying at such a good speed that, you know, the drop isn't significant. But just know, this is the thing with that small air cylinder in this Aspen, you're going to have some things. And that kind of gets us into this rifle, who it's for, and I guess the expectations moving forward. All right, guys, so if you're who would you consider to buy this rifle? Someone who wants to keep things simple. They want a step above the Springers and the multi-pump single shots, but they don't want to get into the PCP realm of having extra tanks and extra pumps or compressors, because all that kind of stuff it takes a lot of money, believe it or not. Just air in itself. If you rent a big 6,000 PSI air tank, you're talking a couple $100s a year. If you have a compressor, let's say it lasts 5 years, 8 years, that's still a couple $100s a year you have to buy in there. This is a one-stop solution for you to kind of get into the PCP realm like performance without all the investment in the other gear. If you have small pests around the farm, it's one of those things that it takes a step up above the Springers and the actual multi-pumps, and you're getting a follow-up shot, 1 to 5 extra follow-up shots without actually having to pump. That's really nice. Hunting on the go is another advantage for this air rifle, meaning there's no extra tanks you're gonna have to take with you in the field. You could be out all day long or all week long without having to worry about refilling your air tanks or anything like that. All right, so suggestions to not buy this rifle if you're gonna do a lot of shooting. PCP rifles, FX rifles, you can get 100, 300 shots without having to refill. This was it was pretty brutal at the range, testing out, a dozen, 2 dozen different types of projectiles. I was constantly pumping, and it gets very tiresome. So if you have a lot of testing or a lot of shooting to do, multiple sparrows or farm work where you're shooting 20, 30 shots, maybe 100 shots a day, this is gonna get a little old. It's not really a PCP replacement. So this rifle kind of sits right in the middle between the Springers, the single pumps, the multi-pump single shots, and then like this whole other world of PCP rifles. And it's a nice area if you're looking to get the benefits of kind of both. And there's not a lot of competition to the rifle as far as, I think this is about the only one left out there on the market right now. So for me, I like this rifle. I think it fits a nice price point. Its accuracy is good if you take the time and adjust and really get down. The groups that's been shown here, these were a quick overview. No cleaning of the barrel, pump it up, just kind of get it close to what you think, the expectations. It should shoot well and shoot it. And that all can be refined. If you have concerns, my concern as well is in the quality control of this rifle, meaning the pump, how long will that last? Some of the magazines that are breaking, it has a very consumer grade feel to it, meaning it's very plasticky, and that is a concern. If you have QC concerns and you're not a fix-it yourself, you could look at it this one a couple different ways. One, buy the rifle for 2 or 3 years, see if it lasts. If it breaks, just buy another one. If you want to get away from the Springers and you don't want to get into the PCP world, because believe it or not, the PCP world will cost you a couple $100s a year no matter what anyway. But if you're one of those that can kind of weather the storm and you want to do pest control on the cheap and get better accuracy and more power out of your traditional rifles, your Springers, this would be probably the only only choice you really have. So there you have it. Let me know if you got comments, questions below. See you next week.